the Houston Texans that they move on, and they're hosting a playoff game in what will be a very entertaining game. I don't think anyone really saw this. And again, this is a Colts and Texans team you mentioned. I think they're both really ahead of schedule. I mean, one of these teams won the division, and now the Houston Texans have a home playoff game. We saw what their stadium was like on Monday in the national championship. It is a loud environment, and the Houston Texans fans, I mean, the last time they were in a playoff game set, that was against the Kansas City Chiefs, where they're up 21-0 and then lost 53-24 or something like that. So there's a lot going into this game. This is Deshaun Watson's former team going up against his current team, but Deshaun Watson won't be on the field. What are the big storylines that you're looking at for the first game, the Saturday afternoon, Texans hosting Joe Flacco and the Cleveland Browns?
I mean, you mentioned one of the biggest ones is, these are obviously the ripples of the Deshaun Watson trade. It's crazy to think that these teams are facing each other and clashing, and we're not even seeing Deshaun Watson on the field. And I think that's the storyline. Obviously, that's the big one, but more so it's the veteran Joe Flacco, the 39-year-old, versus the rookie CJ Stroud, and really going to see, experience means a lot in the NFL. Like you can't buy playoff experience, and Joe Flacco has a lot of that, but CJ Stroud is the more dynamic, athletic quarterback, so it'll be very interesting to see. We also have seen a history of CJ Stroud come up in big games. We saw it all throughout Ohio State. Michigan fans weren't too thrilled when CJ Stroud was in college because of what he was able to do in these big moments, and this is his biggest moment so far in his career, obviously, coming off of his first ever primetime game victory as well, going against Joe Flacco, a guy who's done it. He's a veteran of all accounts, Super Bowl champion. I think that, to me, it is the biggest storyline in terms of what we're going to be watching in this, our first playoff game of the year.
And this is two teams that faced off in Houston a few weeks ago, right? Week 16, Cleveland dominated Houston and 36-22. So Joe Flacco...
CJ Stroud wasn't playing in that game.
Correct, he wasn't, but Joe Flacco still was going up against that defense. I think for me, there's a couple things that stand out. First of all, CJ Stroud seems like every time he's in a big game, whether it was the national championship against Georgia, which he balled out but just didn't get the win, or as we saw, first primetime game in the NFL, this guy performs very well on the light. It's going to be the fact that he is a guy whose whole season wasn't a guy who turned the ball over. So Trevor Lawrence was doing this the year. Josh Allen against the Dolphins turned the ball over a few times as well. So turnovers are huge in the playoffs because it just creates an entire momentum if you get the drive going. I mean, anytime you're playing an NFL game, a turnover can change the entire game, but it gets magnified, obviously, in a playoff game. Cleveland defense is good. I mean, Myles Garrett's probably going to win Defensive Player of the Year, we think. But I think that's going to be a storyline I'm looking at. I also think that when you look at what Houston is lacking on offense, I know Nico Collins had a big game, but he's going to go up against Denzel Ward in Cleveland. That's going to be a big matchup for them. It's going to be really interesting to see, who are the guys that are going to step up. And I know we both have some interesting picks for some of the guys that need to step up in that game. But, Cleveland's got Kareem Hunt and Jerome Ford. Nick Chubb is still up, but Amari Cooper down the stretch has been one of the more elite, type of receivers in the league, very Amari Cooper-like, that we hadn't seen in the past with the other 3 or 4 quarterbacks that had played without him throughout the season. On Houston's side, I just question, do they have enough weapons? I mean, David Njoku, another guy who's really stepped up as of late. Houston's defense is good, but can they counteract that? And again, Joe Flacco's been there. CJ Stroud hasn't. Maybe that's kind of, I don't know what's going on. I can kind of go into this blind and kind of go into this. But for me, there's a guy in Jerome Ford that's going to be the real standout player for Cleveland. And I think it's because when I look at what they're trying to do in Cleveland, I mean, again, you got arguably 2 Coach of the Year nominations in D'Amico Ryan and Kevin Stefanski going up, one calling the offensive plays, one on the defensive side of things. How is that going to be an interesting matchup as well? But I look at what Jerome Ford has done for the last few weeks. He's caught balls out of the backfield. He's run efficiently and effectively for the Cleveland Browns. Again, they've got one of the stronger offensive lines, We saw what Indianapolis' O-line was able to do with Jonathan Taylor, as we just mentioned, having a career day, or the best of his season for sure. If Cleveland does that blueprint, I think the edge goes to Cleveland. They're actually coming in as a road favorite at -2.5. And again, Seth, this is only one of 3 of the playoff games that will be played in a dome. So weather conditions aren't a factor. Who do you like, though, as someone that needs to step up in this Cleveland-Houston game?
Yeah, first of all, I agree with Jerome Ford being a pivotal piece in that offense and just what he's able to do. And again, stepping up in the absence of Nick Chubb. That's a storyline that we've watched all year and have been impressed by, and really did not see that coming. But for me, I think a key player is the running back on the other side of the ball. You look at this Houston Texans team, we've mentioned it a lot. They are young. They have very little playoff experience, but someone who does have that experience is Devin Singletary, a guy who edged out Dameon Pierce to be the RB1, who can catch the ball in the backfield, who can run it, who's playing his best football right now, by all accounts. And for CJ Stroud to have that reliability in a veteran running back is going to be huge, because as you mentioned, like Nico Collins, this is going to be his first playoff game. Obviously, Dalton Schultz kind of does have that veteran experience as well, but I think the way that Devin Singletary provides, or just what he provides this offense and what he provides CJ Stroud, knowing that he has that veteran running back that he can dump it off to in the flats if he needs to, he can give to fight those extra yards. I think that's going to be huge, because this Cleveland defense is scary, and if you don't run the ball on them, you have no chance of winning. And it's really going to come down to if Devin Singletary can provide that little veteran push in terms of what his productivity is in this offense.